Okay, so I might end up doing some kind of scripted video about this topic in the future, but I just wanted to get these thoughts out of my head while I have all the words that I want to say in there, and to maybe flesh out the concept of what I'm about to talk about, which is the difference between appreciating something and enjoying something, and how I think that this prevalent idea in culture that there is an objective quality to a work of art, as well as a level on which the individual enjoys it, I think that idea comes from this appreciation versus enjoyment thing. But that defining it as objective versus subjective experience is going about it wrong. So, when people say that something is objectively good, what they really mean is that it holds up to an understood standard, right? Like, if a picture is well drawn by conventional definition, people would say that that is an objectively good picture. But that really just means that it's something that most people can appreciate. It's a picture that's drawn in a way that we all understand through, logic, and we can explain why that thing is good and that it is well made, because there's a common understanding of things that appeal to a vast number of people. But that doesn't really mean that it's objectively good, because to any individual person, it could have no value. And to give you an example, let's say that there was somebody who spent decades mastering the craft of making statues of Vladimir Putin out of literal shit, just carving shit into statues. And they were masterful at doing it. But no one wants that. No one wants a statue of Vladimir Putin made of shit. So it has no value to anyone except for the person who created it. So even though we can say that that person is incredibly skilled at what they do and has a deft understanding of how to make that thing, can you really call it objectively good if it's something that no one finds any value in? I don't think so. I think that when we see something like that, even if we personally don't enjoy it, we have an appreciation for the technique, because on some level we understand how difficult it is to accomplish something of a certain caliber. But if we personally don't enjoy it, then saying that it's good is kind of regressive and missing the point. Like, if I go around, sometimes people say to me things like, you're not good at being objective in your views. And I think, well, why would I ever want to just rate things on the basis of what is consensus seen as a good thing? Because I would rather change the consensus, right? Like, if there's something that I think is the most valuable, then I want to put my data point into the pool and say, like, well, here's what I value. And I think that when people look at things differently, when they say, like, oh, I like it, but that doesn't mean it's good, then what they're doing is reducing the value of their own opinions. They're pulling their own data points out of the pool and just, looking at this other one, like the other data points that have already been old and accepted in a way. Like, for instance, show don't tell storytelling, right? Is something that I think everyone appreciates what's good about it. Everyone appreciates the phrase show don't tell, and we can celebrate it and look at it and say that that's a good way of writing stories. But that's entirely on the basis of the fact that a large number of people appreciate that kind of story. There are types of storytelling that involve lots of telling and not a lot of showing that some people might still enjoy. Some people might enjoy those stories. And for those people to say, well, I love it, but I recognize that it's not good, then they're devaluing their own, stance, their own opinions, and making it out like, like the consensus matters more than the individuals, when the consensus is born of individuals. The consensus is not some magical thing created by God. It's not an objective standard that exists somewhere out in the universe. The consensus is born from each individual saying that they like that thing. And therefore, if you keep stripping your own opinions off and trying to agree with the consensus, then the consensus starts to lose meaning. It's kind of like if there was something that like, let's say the consensus was that there was this one type of camera angle that's considered amazing for this and that reason. And everyone appreciates that, but let's say that over time no one likes it anymore. Let's say that people don't actually enjoy the camera angle. People have just heard what makes that angle good. But they keep saying that that's the best camera angle, but then no one actually likes it. Then the consensus, the idea that we all have in our heads, is totally meaningless, because what people actually value is over here and is being written off because it doesn't match the preconceived consensus. So this is why I have always said, like, when people ask me, like, all right, well, we know what your top 10 favorite anime are, but what do you think are the 10 best anime? And I go, well, my top 10 favorites, because those are the ones that have the things I value. And I'm entering that data point on the grid. There is no show that I enjoy more than the shows that I have on there. Now, there is a level on which I appreciate a lot of shows that I don't enjoy, because I appreciate what other people get out of them and how they relate to that consensus. So let's say, for instance, Game of Thrones is a very popular show that a lot of people like, and I think that show does an amazing number of things very well, and I have a strong appreciation for that show. I appreciate all of the things that it does that are so good, but in terms of what I personally value out of a work, it can be contentious. There's a lot of things I don't like in the show that maybe other people won't consider a problem, or there's lots of things that that I like about other shows more, and it just doesn't reflect my values perfectly. So if I gave Game of Thrones a 10 out of 10 because of the fact that I appreciated what other people liked about it, then that would be completely ignoring the fact that it's not actually a 10 out of 10 for me. And again, I'm removing that data point. I'm making it so 10 out of 10 now means consensus, as opposed to meaning real consensus, which is what everyone collectively thinks. Which is why we get this wrong-headed stuff, like people complaining about negative reviews on like affecting the scores of Metacritic or something. Like, the score that's on Metacritic should be the actual consensus, each individual person's ideas. It doesn't matter if that person seems comically wrong and to fundamentally misunderstand the entire point of the work. The point is that consensus is everyone's opinions. Not everyone who's correct in your mind about the work, but everyone, whether they're totally wrong or totally right. That's how we get consensus. And I think that's important and needs to be protected, and honestly, I didn't think about that at all before I started this rant, so I've kind of gotten so far off track of what I originally wanted to say that I don't remember how to take it back, but this is more interesting than what I wanted to say. So, I'm just thinking about, I think that the reason that some people are protective of the objective standard and of the appreciation is that there's a lot of ways to appreciate something, and I think that they go deep. Like, sometimes there's an anime series that I might not even really like that much, but there's a lot of things I appreciate about it that I think that people are underappreciating. That even though it's a show I don't like, I can see these elements and say, like, well, there's a lot of craft that went into this or that element of it, and I love exploring that aspect of craft and being able to point out when something is done with a level of craftsmanship. But on the other side of the coin, I don't want to overvalue things that might not necessarily matter to me. Like, if we look at Zankyou no Terror, a show that had incredible directing. I made a whole 20-minute video about how well directed the first episode was, and then another whole video about how I thought it handled exposition really well in episode 2, and then the entire rest of the show I hated, and I made a video about that, which is unlisted because I don't like how I wrote the video. But, it would be inauthentic of me to say that there's all these things I appreciate that I think were good craftsmanship, but then to say that the show is therefore good when there were so many things that I don't value or that I think are terrible about it. And, giving it a higher score on that basis would be wrong. Kind of like when people say, how can you possibly give Sword Art Online a 1 out of 10 when on the visuals alone it would be above a 1. And I don't value visuals that highly that I'd give it extra points for that when it has so many things to deduct, you know? So I think that there's something to be said for appreciating things about shows you don't like, but I also think that there's a huge danger in scoring things based on appreciation, or looking at something and saying it's objectively good, but I don't like it, or I like it, but objectively it's not that good, when objectively, first of all, shouldn't be a word. What you really mean is consensus, and consensus should be something that you are deliberately trying to affect with your opinions. You should be trying to say, I like it, here's why, and now consensus has been skewed a little more this way because I've shared my feelings and moved the data over in this direction, you know? So, yeah, I guess I've probably made my point even more than once. So, that's it.